All right, so ancient Egypt, anyone. We're diving deep into Wilbur Smith's River God today. And looks like we've got 2 book reviews and a whole YouTube video breakdown to help us navigate this one. I mean, over 600 pages, right? It's a lot of Nile to cover, but
Well, hopefully we can give everyone a good feel for the book without, getting too bogged down.
yeah, exactly. Hit the highlights, see what makes it tick. And speaking of things that tick, let's talk about Tida, our main man in this story. He's not your typical pharaoh, though, is he? More like a, a slave who kind of breaks the mold.
Yeah, they describe him as a eunuch, but also a total polymath. It's like, how does that even work? But Smith really uses this unique position to explore how power really works in ancient Egypt.
I like that, the power behind the scenes. Because the reviews definitely point out how Tida's sharp mind and perspective really drive the whole story. And we get all of that straight from him because it's written in first person, right?
Yeah, you really get inside his head, which some people loved, and well, others not so much.
Yeah, how come?
Well, one reviewer thought his voice was super engaging, even though he brags a lot. Like at one point, he claims he basically built most of Thebes himself.
Whoa, hold on.
Yeah, right. But then you've got the YouTuber who thought that was a bit much, like insufferable almost.
It's funny how one person's engaging is another person's too much. Because it depends on your tolerance for bravado or something like that.
Could be, could be. It does make you wonder, though, if Titus' confidence is like genuine, or if it's a way of making up for his position, you know?
Right, because in that world, status is everything. Speaking of status, though, let's shift gears a bit to the love story here. Tida's mistress, Lostris, and this warrior, Tanis, are, well, they're head over heels for each other.
Forbidden love, classic. And of course, Smith sets it all against this backdrop of like Egyptian power struggles, which just makes it even more dramatic.
Oh, for sure.
Especially because Lostris herself goes from like a young girl to Pharaoh's wife to basically running the whole show as queen regent.
Wow, so the stakes are pretty high from the get-go. And then, to make things even spicier, we find out they have a son together, right? The YouTuber mentioned that keeping his parentage a secret is like the whole crux of the story.
Yeah, power struggles go way beyond the battlefield, Every decision they make, it's all about protecting their son's lineage, adds this constant tension.
Can't imagine the pressure.
Yeah.
But on top of all that, they've got to deal with an invasion. The Hyksos come knocking.
And they weren't messing around, historically speaking. They had chariots, composite bows, all this advanced weaponry that the Egyptians had never seen before.
So it was like a total clash of civilizations, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly everything's up for grabs.
Eh.
Makes you wonder how any of us would react in a situation like that.
It's a good point, especially with how fast technology changes things these days.
Yeah, like one minute you're at the top of your game and the next, who knows?
And Smith really gets into that. It's not just about the conflict, but how the Egyptians adapt, especially Tida.
He's fascinated by it all, right?
Mhm.
Instead of just freaking out, he studies their chariots, tries to figure out how it all works.
It shows their ingenuity, their ability to roll with the punches.
Maybe even turn it to their advantage eventually.
Exactly. And I mean, think about it. Would they have gotten there on their own? Or did the Hyksos force their hand?
Now that's a question. But here's another one for you. The YouTuber mentioned that Smith claims this whole thing, this whole story, is based on actual scrolls about Tida's life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wild, right?
It's a bold claim, that's for sure. Probably some embellishment, but still, you got to wonder what's real and what's artistic license,
Yeah, exactly. Where's the line?
Does that make you look at it differently?
Maybe a little. I mean, it makes it more, I don't know, like you're peeking into a secret history or something.
Right. And it makes you think, how much of history is just, interpretations, not just straight facts. Totally. And speaking of interpretations, the YouTuber was saying how they were super inspired by how resilient the characters are. They even said it, motivated them personally, which is pretty cool.
I mean, that's the power of stories, right? Even if it's ancient Egypt, the struggles still feel real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, but we can't talk about River God without mentioning the Nile itself. One reviewer said it's like a constant presence throughout the book, like almost another character.
Oh, yeah. The Nile's not just some river in the background. It's like symbolic,
Yeah.
of life, of time just keeps flowing.
It's the heart of Egypt, literally. And you see that reflected in the story, right?
Definitely. It sees empires rise and fall, people come and go, but it just keeps going.
Makes you think about what's constant in our own lives, what stays the same when everything else changes.
That's deep. But it's also worth noting that the Nile could be pretty destructive, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like the floods, essential for farming and all, but they could wipe out whole villages, too.
So it's like this double-edged sword, life-giving, but also dangerous.
Exactly, which ties back into that Hyksos invasion, right? It's not just about armies clashing.
More like a whole way of life getting disrupted.
Right, like their chariots and composite bows, that was revolutionary stuff.
They basically forced the Egyptians to, like, up their tech game, didn't they?
It's like a history lesson in how tech can change everything overnight.
But it's also how Tita responds to it that's interesting. First, he's amazed by it, but then he uses his own knowledge to try and, like, one-up them, almost.
He's like, all right, challenge accepted.
Uh-huh. Exactly. It shows you how, I don't know, resilient people can be, even when it seems like everything's going wrong.
For sure, there's always that drive to learn, to adapt, to come out on top.
And that brings us back to, like, what's constant in our lives, right?
Right.
What keeps us grounded when the world's going crazy?
Those are the big questions that, like, sneak up on you when you read River God, you know?
It makes you think beyond just the story itself.
Totally. Now, I did want to circle back to those differing opinions on Tita, remember?
Yeah. Some loved him, some thought he was too much.
It's so interesting how one character can spark such different reactions, you know?
Maybe it's about what we personally value, like, you see ambition as a good thing or a bad thing?
It could also be about, like, the cultural context, right?
What we see as boastful now might have been totally normal back then.
That's true. We tend to judge the past by our own standards, but it's important to remember things were different.
That's what I love about historical fiction, though, getting a glimpse into another world, another mindset.
It helps us see how much we have in common with people from the past, but also how much has changed.
So, okay, let's dive a bit deeper into this love triangle situation. It's not just a love story, is it? There's so much more going on.
Oh yeah, it's about duty, expectations, what you're supposed to do versus what your heart wants.
And with Lostris becoming Queen Regent, it's like those choices affect everyone, not just her.
The weight of responsibility, you know, that's a timeless theme.
And then you've got Tida caught in the middle, right? He's not just watching from the sidelines.
His unique position lets him navigate those circles of power in ways others can't, you know, being a eunuch and all.
It's like he has access that no one else does, which makes his perspective even more valuable.
He sees things from both inside and outside the palace walls, which is pretty insightful.
Okay, so last thing I wanted to hit on is that whole Nile symbolism thing again. Both reviewers talked about how it represents, like, the lifeblood of Egypt, you know?
It's such a powerful image constantly flowing, just like life itself.
It reminds you that even when things are chaotic, there's still this natural order, this continuity.
Because it's seen it all, the good and the bad, and just keeps going.
It makes you feel kind of small, you know, but also connected to something bigger.
It definitely makes you think about our place in history, right? Like, what will people say about us when we're gone?
What will our legacy be?
And those are some of the big questions that River God makes you grapple with, I think.
It's not just an escape. It's like a reflection on what it means to be human. And remember, this is just the first book. There's a whole series to explore after this.
So much more to uncover about this world Smith has created.
But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's take a moment to just appreciate how well this story's told, right?
Oh, for sure. Smith knows how to weave a tale, that's for sure.
He makes you feel like you're right there in ancient Egypt, experiencing it all firsthand.
And even if some details might be, you know, fictionalized a bit, the power of the story shines through.
That's the magic of historical fiction, right?
Yeah.
It lets us connect with the past in a way that feels personal and real. And it's not just like a history lesson. You actually care about what happens to these people.
Right. They're not just like cardboard cutouts. They've got flaws. They mess up, you know, just like us.
Like, you really see Tida wrestle with his ambition and then Lostris trying to balance love and duty.
It's like, yeah, human nature hasn't changed that much, even after all this time.
Okay, I got to bring this up one more time, that whole ancient scrolls thing. It's just, I don't know, it's so intriguing.
Right. Makes you wonder what else is out there, hidden away.
Like, lost stories, secret histories, just waiting to be, I don't know, unearthed or something.
It reminds you that what we call history is really just one version of events.
Yeah, and there could be so many other perspectives we don't even know about.
It's like maybe we only have half the picture, at best.
That's what makes historical fiction so cool, though. It lets you fill in those gaps, imagine those other possibilities.
And connect with the past in a way that feels, I don't know, more personal and more real.
Speaking of real, that Nile symbolism really stuck with me. Both reviewers talked about it. How it's not just a river, it's like the lifeblood of Egypt.
Oh, absolutely. It's constantly changing, ebbing and flowing, but always there.
It's like it's seen everything,
Yeah.
Empires rise and fall, people come and go.
But the river just keeps moving, connecting it all together.
And that makes you think about your own place in the world, right? Like, how do we fit into that bigger picture?
What mark are we going to leave?
What will people say about us when, we're gone?
Those are the questions River God leaves you with, I think.
It's not just entertainment. It makes you think about those bigger things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening, we want to hear from you.
What stood out to you about River God?
What made you think? What sparked your curiosity?
Let us know. And if you're intrigued, definitely check out the whole series. There's a whole world of ancient Egyptian adventure waiting for you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll be back soon with another journey through information, so stay tuned.